All right, folks. It is noon, so we're going to get started. In case you haven't already noticed, I'm not Liz. I'm filling in today. My name is Shep Stearns. I'm a value-added dairy extension specialist here at UT. Sarah Cornelis is joining us today and is doing our webinar Wednesday presentation for this month. She's going to be talking about market outlets for value-added dairy products. Just before I hand it over to Sarah, I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items that Liz usually reminds you folks of. I have put the evaluation survey link in the chat here, along with the Master Dairy Certification portal for paying the fee for getting your certification. If you would like to pay by check, that's an option as well. Just make the check out to the University of Tennessee and put Master Dairy Certification in the memo line. So again, Sarah Cornelis is our speaker for today. Sarah is a senior extension associate at Penn State, and her areas of expertise include value-added dairy business, entrepreneurship, marketing, and consumer trends. So I'll hand it over to you, Sarah. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Shep. Glad to be here this afternoon. And I thank everyone for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. To the correct screen. There we go. So hopefully everybody can see that. Before I get started, I just want to note that please feel free to jump in and ask any questions throughout. I do have the chat box open on my end, so if you want to use that to ask any questions, I'll try to kind of look over at it every so often to see if there's anything in there. If not, certainly at the end, I will go to the questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Again, I'm really happy to be here this afternoon. I appreciate the invitation from Liz and Shep to do the webinar. And so today's webinar, what I'll be talking about is using labels in marketing of dairy foods to consumers. There's certainly requirements for labels, but I think labels also serve a really important marketing tool to consumers, particularly for consumers who may not be aware of you personally, your dairy farm business. So let's see if I can. There we go. So labels, I'll start out with kind of what purposes labels serve before I kind of roll into more of the marketing aspects. So first, labels provide that required product information, and this is information that's required by FDA that all food products must provide and share on their labels. There's also some special information that you can put on your labels, or in some cases must be shared on your labels. And then finally, what the focus for today will be is marketing to the consumer. So that first piece, there's information that must be on your food label, your product identity, the net contents, the ingredient statement, nutrition statement, manufacturer information. And then depending on what state you're in, there may be some lot information for traceability purposes that you have to include, as well as that sell by date. And here, at least in Pennsylvania, we just had change in law regarding sell by date. So this may be whether it's a sell by date or a best by date, that may be different depending on what state that you're in. The special information that I noted, it typically revolves around allergens. So, you must share whether there's allergens in your product that you're making or in the ingredients that you're using for the making of your product. You can also need to share information about flavorings that you're using. There's some special labeling requirements around ice cream. And then there's certifications and some regulations that you have to follow regarding nutrient and health claims. So those two areas are not exactly my area. So I would, for whether it's the nutrition labeling or those special information that has to be shared on labels, I would direct you to, there's a whole host of resources, some of which I have listed here on the screen, whether it's FDA. They have some documents that you can look at and read for that guidance on labeling and what their requirements are. USDA with their nutrient database. And then the International Dairy Foods Association, they have a very nice manual, and I believe I want to say maybe every other year, they offer a very in-depth webinar on labeling of dairy products. And if it's a bit, that webinar course is a bit pricey, but it's very, very helpful and provides you a great depth of information. And then finally, a little plug for Penn State. We have some recorded webinars on our dairy food processing website, and that specifically tackle those first two areas regarding the nutrition labeling and the allergen and special information labeling requirements. So why, the focus today here is using labels for marketing. So why is the label important to marketing? First of all, think about the number of choices that consumers have when they walk into, whether it's a grocery store or if they attend an on-farm, a farmer's market, or even an on-farm market for somebody who may be sourcing a lot of products from local farms and selling it in their on-farm store. The consumers have to sort through all of that product availability, consider their needs, and then make that decision about what they're going to purchase. And so the label allows you to create an awareness and drive an interest in food products. If you think about particularly, say wine and craft beer, for instance, they have some very, very creative and unique labels, and that's done to draw the attention of the consumer and hopefully, get that consumer interested in that product because of that creative labeling. So the label can influence the perceptions of the product that the consumer is looking at. So, whether it's a high quality product, whether it's more of a commodity product, for instance, a lot of different perceptions about, the quality and any attributes, flavorings that product possesses, which in turn then helps drive those purchasing decisions that the consumer has to make. And also, there's information that says that the label can help determine whether a consumer accepts the product. So what that level of acceptance is by the consumer for whether or not they like the product in the end. So there's it's an intangible, but they're looking at the label and saying, okay, this is a product I'm going to like or not like, based on that, what they're seeing. I talked about how the label can influence perceptions, and there's an example of that, that's being a signal of quality and those desirable attributes that the consumer is looking for. You can share that on the label. And then finally, the label can create an opportunity and that potential for you to gain some premium pricing or to price your product a little higher. Conversely, a poor label can work against you in that regard. So if you have a very high priced product, but the label just doesn't align with that quality, it can, perhaps, hit the consumer the wrong way, and they don't see that match. Those things don't align in their mind, and they're unwilling to pay that premium price. So you really need to think about, what's the alignment of the way a label looks and the information it conveys to the consumer with your pricing. So for the new consumer, and this is the consumer that perhaps is not aware of your business, aware of your product, the label can help you stand out from the competition. So, think about your product at the farmer's market where there may be some other vendors with similar products, or at the grocery store, for instance. Again, there's other products competing for the consumer's attention. That label can help you stand out from the competition through its use of design, colors, and other information. You can help appeal to a consumer's values and emotions and belief systems through the information that you put on a label. And I have examples of all of this further on in the presentation. Telling your story is very, it's very important in the agricultural industry, and there's an opportunity to use those labels, to use the space on the container, and which can be used for labeling purposes, to help tell your farm story and tell the story about your business or about your product. You can also share helpful information, and I know helpful information is kind of a broad statement, but I'm thinking things like, what is a certain product? So if a product is new to your consumer market, or if what they can do with this product, those sorts of things. And again, I have some examples of these items. And all of this will help to create trust with that consumer. So if you can build and create and build trust with the consumer, you're more likely to have them as a repeat customer, which is what every business wants. It's much more effective if you can get customers to return to you and continue purchasing from you than to have to continually generate new customers. And then for existing customers that have already purchased your products before, the label helps provide a sense of familiarity with their product. They know what they're looking for. They can easily pick it out. They know what to expect from you because they've seen that label before, and they, again, they're just familiar with you. And along with that, there's a sense of comfort. Again, they're familiar. They're comforted by that label. There's no surprises there. So, once you put a lot of work in on the front end to designing the label so that you can use it long term for that sense of familiarity and comfort with existing customers. And again, it goes towards building and maintaining that trust. If your label is constantly changing, then it can initiate questions in the consumer's mind about what's going on. Are there changes in ownership of the business? Are there changes in the formulation of the product? Are they getting the same product? So a consistency with labels will help maintain that trust that they have with you and your product. So there's some very important information that consumers look for on labels, and there's 4 main points. These are the top 4, I should say. And this information was not necessarily for just dairy products. So it is for all food products. So first off, consumers are looking for nutritional information. And you can see beneath that point, I have, this is important for 71% of consumers in store versus 44% of online shoppers. So for each of these points, I have this, differentiate whether the level of importance to in-store shoppers versus online shoppers. After nutritional information, they're looking for health benefits. So there's, one of the drivers in food consumption is, nutrition and health and wellness. And so consumers are looking to the label to determine what the health benefits are for any particular product they're looking for. Thirdly, they're looking for preparation instructions. And then I shouldn't say last, but in fourth place here, they're looking for that story. What is the story or information about the brand or the business, the farm behind the product? And in all cases, this information is more important to in-store shoppers compared to online shoppers. And I think that's because, if they're online, typically there's other places that they can go to get that information, whether it's the website or social media. It's very easy to find that information as opposed to in-store where you have to make a decision right there. You're not going to spend, say half an hour in the grocery store or an hour sorting through, maybe getting on your phone, that sort of thing. So people are really relying on a label for this information. So when thinking about your label and how to design it, or perhaps some adjustments that you want to make to it, first off, think about where your products are going to be sold. Is it going to be in your own farm market, on your own farm stand? Are you going to the farmer's market? Will your product be as part of a CSA? Will you be doing online, other retail markets, grocery stores, etc.? I mean, there's a whole host of options in terms of where your products could be sold. So you want to think about, where it's going to be sold and what the expectations of that target of the customers that frequent those outlets are going to be. Just as an example, somebody coming to your on-farm store may not need the same information on a label, or may not expect the same information on a label than a customer in the grocery store. Because the person that comes to your market, they know about you. They've already developed they already at least have an interest in you and your product if they haven't previously already purchased from you. You also want to think about the type or the format and size of the packaging that you're being used. And obviously this is going to vary by the particular food product that you're making. Fluid milk, for instance, has containers, they may be jugs, whether it's plastic or glass. Cheese, there's a lot more variability in that packaging. It may be a plastic wrap, it may be a paper wrap. I have examples where cheese is in wax. And so, you have to think about what is that packaging that you're using. What is the size and the surface area that is available to you for a label? And then finally, who are your targeted consumers? And so it's very important to understand who your product is, who you're marketing your product to. There's differences in the type of information consumers are looking for based on what generation they fall into. So, so what age they are, perhaps what income bracket they are. So they may have some different levels of price sensitivity. And then, of course, gender, and there could be other, ways to break the consumers apart and think about, what would be important for them to see on a label. So just some examples of, standing out from the competition. I have a couple of pictures here that I took in some markets. The first one on the left is, trying to get my cursor. Here we go. So here on the left, we have, the cheese display in a market, and this was actually in New England. But as you walk up, think about what here in this picture, I don't know how big it is on your screen, but what stands out to you? What draws your eye? And this is, the same experience that, any consumer is experiencing. And so for me, and it's important to point out that this is going to be different for each individual. But for me, I was drawn, to these cheeses here on the shelf. The way they are arranged, but then they all looked similar, but they had this difference in the color of the wax, where perhaps, there's these other items that are in plastic or paper wrap. They look a little bit more homogeneous. So to me, these cheeses popped out on the shelf. And then on the right, is an example of fluid milk. And I wish I had taken a wider shot, because what you don't see are all the white jugs on the shelf around this milk. But, if you think about the white jugs that consumers are accustomed to, these colored jugs, these different shapes, it stands out. It draws the consumer's eye that, if they haven't seen it before, they're going to say, oh, what is this? And maybe take a closer look at those products. So I mentioned earlier that you have the opportunity to appeal to consumers' values and belief systems through what you do with your labels. You have opportunity to provide certification claims and participate in certification programs that you can use those pictures, those symbols on your labels and your packaging. You can provide credence claims. So this is a step below that certification level. And you can also do some cause marketing. And some of the examples of issues that we typically see with these certifications and claims are, usually surround sustainability, animal care, participation in charities, and of course, there's lots of other opportunities there as well. And these, appealing to the values and beliefs of consumers is pretty important to them. Just a few statistics here, more than half of consumers prefer that to be aligned with companies and brands that align with their values. So if you can demonstrate to the consumer that, you hold certain values that they may also hold, they may be more likely to purchase your product. And among younger consumers, for instance, Gen Z, 78% are willing to pay more for a product if that business and that brand supports a cause that they're passionate about. And specifically for frozen treat buyers, 38%, that's a little low, but 38% are more likely to purchase a treat from a brand if they take a stance on a cause. But below, you can see I have the numbers for those younger generations, 51% for Gen Z and 54% for millennials. So again, looking at the demographics of your target market, what's important to those consumers and sharing that information. So some examples of different certifications that are available to participate in. We've got ones that span from production related. So for instance, this is Pennsylvania Certified Organic. It's grass fed. It could be having to do with the treatment of the animals with animal welfare approved or certified humane. It could be, the sourcing of your inputs. So for instance, the fair trade certification, or it could even be how you run your business. And so certified B Corp is more geared to the business side of a business, obviously a business, but not so much the production practices or the inputs. It's more about, for instance, how you treat your workers and things that you may do there. And so that's a newer certification. And so again, think about what you're already doing, and perhaps one of these certifications would be easy for you to get. So certifications, again, those are those symbols on packaging to indicate that your product meets certain requirements. Those requirements are defined by each of those certifying bodies. If it has to do with bioengineered or non-GMO, there's FDA guidance available that has to be followed there. And the important point here is that you have to have that documentation, keep the records that allows you to, prove to the certifying body that your product meets their requirements. And so record keeping is extremely important for certifications. You can't just tell the certifying body when they come out to visit your farm or visit your manufacturing facility that you're doing certain things. You have to be able to prove it to them. Okay. However, there's lots of ways to appeal to consumers through non-certifications. So not having those certifications, through just words and images on your labels. And I have a variety here. Let's see, this one that I'm circling here with my laser, they're talking about grass-fed. They're not certified grass-fed, but they're telling the consumer that it's 95% grass-fed, and they're telling the consumer exactly how many days their cows are on pasture. That may be important to their consumers. See, down here in the bottom right, we have a cheese where, when you purchase from them, they are supporting a foundation in Vermont. And so if you also support that particular foundation in their activities, you may be more inclined to purchase that product. The ownership of businesses and diversity and equity issues appeal to a number of consumers. And so that's another way, there's ways to convey that to the consumer. And this particular product, for instance, indicates that the business is owned by women and was founded by women. So again, consumer, that may be appeal to a certain segment of consumers. See, we have this product here, and I know it could be small on your screen, but they have a statement that says it's caringly crafted by conservation-minded dairy farmers. So consumers who are concerned about, conservation issues, perhaps it's water or other sustainability issues, again, they may be drawn to purchase from this business because they feel they may be like-minded on certain environmental issues, for instance. So, and you can see there are a lot of other ways to appeal to a consumer's values. So telling your story, that was I think that was the fourth most important point for consumers when looking at labels. And so one of the ways that you can tell your story is by indicating your origin, where you're located. And specifically for cheese, 74% of consumers have indicated that while they enjoy trying new cheeses, product origin plays a role in their decision to try that new cheese. And whether it's a state branding program, we've got PA Preferred, there's Kentucky Proud, Colorado Proud, or just a statement on your labels that, so for instance, here's crafted in New York or carefully crafted in Michigan. You can let the consumer know this is the origin, that locale that the product was manufactured. And in a recent survey on goat and sheep market conditions, it turned out that the state a product was produced in was that most desired origin information. So not perhaps the name of the farm or the town or the county or even a larger geographic region. It was the state that consumers were most interested in. Some other ways to tell your story on labels. Again, I do this through examples. I think that's the best way to do it. But you can tell a little bit about how your business was started. So here's a goat yogurt, and again, it's really small on the screen, but it talks about how the farmer's son and his goat placed very high in a national show. And that's kind of the background of their farm and how they got into making goat yogurt. We have butter here. They're showing pictures of the farms, the farm families that they source from. So again, they're making that connection with the consumer that feels that local purchasing or supporting their local farmers is important to them. They're doing it through pictures. These yogurts here, they're just, kind of, they do it on different packaging. So not everything is on the same package, but you can see that, they talk about pasture raised, they celebrate the joy of dairy. Here's a statement about where they're from in Northern California, and that they're certified organic. So if you look at across multiple items of their product, you get that complete story through their labels. And then, here's a fluid milk, and they're using part of their whole bottle wrap to share their story about their farm and their Jersey cows. So I mentioned sharing helpful information. Some of that information may be pairings, how to prepare a product using the product that you're selling, and also some just interesting product facts. So here's a cheese that's suggesting that is well paired with red wine. Down here, there's a Gouda, and the small print says pair with full-bodied red wine in malty craft beer. So again, giving the consumer some suggestions on what they may enjoy when eating the product. There's certain regions in the country that are only now becoming more familiar with cheese curds. If you're from Wisconsin, you probably know what those are very well. But for those who don't, this product explains what a cheese curd is. And so I think that's pretty cool. Even up here tells you how to prepare the cheese curd, for best enjoyment. And then on the back of these goat cheese medallion package, it's giving some suggestions for what you can do, because they're individual servings. And so, if you're not sure, if somebody wasn't sure what to do with it other than, eat it directly, here's some ideas. Okay, so now that you have some ideas about what you could, do on your labels for marketing, and then you have to think about, okay, what are some different tools that I can use? Everything can't be words, so what are some different labeling tools that I can use? And so here's just a list that we'll kind of go through again. I've got examples for many of these. But anything, and you don't have to utilize all of these tools. So obviously what makes sense for you, we talked about, taking into consideration what your product is, what the format of your packaging was, and what that would allow for a label. So you can pick and choose and try to determine what will be most effective for you and your target market. So starting with the brand and logo, oftentimes people think these are the same thing. However, they're not. The logo is more of that image, whereas the brand is the name of the business, but they're very often intertwined. So, I would suggest, think about, when you're thinking about the logo, if you were just to kind of, I should have maybe blurred one of these out, but after a while, a logo will become synonymous with your brand name. So for instance, Fairlife here, I'm sure that after the product is out on the market for a while, consumers will be able to identify the product just by, that cow head image with the exclamation point on its face. Or Land O'Lakes, for instance, and they recently underwent a slight logo change, but it's still very identifiable. So effective logos, some characteristics of them are that they're simple. You get too complex, and it's hard for consumers to decipher or to make out, what the connection to the product is, or even that perhaps it's a dairy farm. You want them to be memorable, flexible with your product so that you can use your logo on a variety of products. If you start out with bottling milk, for instance, but then expand your product line to cheese or butter or ice cream, you want to make sure that your logo is flexible enough and appropriate to be used on all of those different products. And then finally, timeless. I mean, think about some of the brands that have been around for a very long time. Their logos may undergo slight adjustments over time, but more for the most part, it's the same logo with some slight changes. And that allows the consumer to easily identify them. So product name, there's a lot of different ways you can go on product name and using that for marketing. You can keep it simple and straightforward, such as the two examples here I have at the top. They're saying this is garden vegetable flavored cheese, Cajun cheddar cheese, or very simply goat cheese. Okay, it's simple, it's straightforward, the consumer knows what they're going to get. Or you could get more creative, and that can also draw interest and be a point on which a consumer says, hey, that sounds interesting to me, maybe I'll give that a try. So for instance, we have a cheese here in Pennsylvania called Vampire Slayer. Okay, and if you read the ingredient list, then you see, okay, well, there's garlic in it, and so it goes along with vampires, obviously. But they used some creativity. They knew what their ingredients were and said, what can we name it that may draw some interest? I've got the Ben & Jerry's here, where the name of the product doesn't necessarily tell me anything. But between the picture and the ingredients there on the list, they know that the name may not convey what the flavor is going to be, so they list the ingredients on the front. Again, they're using that for that more creative aspect. Sheep milk, sheep is one of those dairy animals that produces at certain times of the year. There's a seasonality here, and so this particular sheep cheese maker has two varieties of cheese. They have Verano, which I have here, which translates to summer, and then they have another one which unfortunately I have not heard pronounced, so I don't want to butcher it, but it translates to winter. So they make two varieties, summer and winter. And depending on the name, when it was manufactured. You have to think about the design of your label. And so, there's a lot of elements to the complete design of a label. You've got the layout of different aspects, whether it's where you place the certification or different statements. And you have to take into a consideration what's required, so that where you're required to place all that, perhaps the nutritional information. So looking at the guidance for that. But beyond that, what do you have control over? And so layout, colors, text, the font size, things like that. The important point is that if you make more than one product, you want there to be a consistency in design across your complete product line. And then use things such as color and imagery to differentiate between those specific items. And so you can see that here on the screen. There's different cheeses here. Each flavor cheese has a different colored wax. With the butter, they're in a different, their containers have a different color lid, and the bottom of the label is a different color depending on the flavor. And let's see what up here, these cheeses, again, the label design, they're all circular, no matter the type, the shape of the cheese product. but there's some consistency there in, not just the shape of the label, but also the fact that the color is always on that bottom half of the label. And when it comes to colors, something to keep in mind is that bright colors such as red, orange, yellows, that helps draw the consumer eye. So if you're thinking about how to make your product stand out in perhaps a crowded marketplace, that can be one way of doing that. Okay, so imagery. This is actually a point where I was set up to kind of perhaps have a little bit of audience participation. So if you're looking at your screen and you have the ability to type into your chat box, I'm interested to see which of these 5 images that you like the best. So which of these is your favorite image? Okay. So we've got kind of votes a little bit all over the place. C, E, D, E. And so now I'll switch, which is your least favorite? So B is the least favorite for one person. Anybody else have a least favorite? Okay. Oh. Okay, good. So I think we had more consistency or agreement on the least favorite than the favorite. So this was a research study looking at attributes and imagery and how that what the consumers liked. And so this particular survey found that the favorite image of these 5 presented to them was actually E, and the least favorite was B. And the reason for this is E, the consumers indicated that this was the most realistic image. So, they were looking at pasture-based dairy product and, the cow eating grass, they felt was realistic and told them exactly what gave them some insight into the product. Compared to B, which I think we all agree that B is the least favorite. The feedback in the survey was that this was an unrealistic picture, that there's no way a glass of milk is going to be larger than the cow, and basically it was unrealistic. So I know there were a couple votes for for other images that were their favorite, and the fact that so I think the simplicity and the realism of E is what kind of brought that out on top compared to, say, C and D. So consumers were looking for something that was a little more real life, and perhaps there's too many elements in C and D. So again, just that's one study. Your consumers could be different, but it's again, considerations to have in mind as you develop your labels when it comes to images. So some other things to think about with images, you can use images to provide information about what the consumer can expect from the product. That may be the flavor, the texture, the source of the product or how it's produced, some production information. Again, you can see I've got some examples on the screen. We've got a couple of frozen products here that show you an image of what to expect when you open that container or when you bite into the product. What can you expect, perhaps in terms of the ingredients and the flavor mix or the texture of the product itself. a little bit about, so here's some images that perhaps are trying to convey production information. So we've got cows on grass, or here with the yogurt product, the fact that it's grass fed because we've got the milk container in sitting in some grass there. Some flavor images for flavors. Here's a piece of pie, so it's Mary and Berry flavored ice cream. So if you don't know what Mary and Berry is, then hopefully that image helps you out with what to expect on the flavor. Pumpkins. This is a pumpkin spice flavored cheese, so there's pumpkins in the background of the label. Chocolate, dark chocolate specifically for this milk. And then, this cheese here at the bottom right is a 3 blend. So it's cow, goat, and sheep milk blend. And so they're putting an image of cow, sheep, and goat right there on the label, so that consumers, it's that visual connection to what the product is, because they may not understand what 3 milk blend means, but with the picture, it helps tie it together for the consumer. QR codes are a tool that you can use if you have a small label and you have a lot of information that you'd like to share with the consumer. Here's some examples of what you could share, the information you could share or take consumers to when they scan that QR code. And for anybody that's not familiar with QR codes, you just scan that with the camera on your smartphone, and it can take you to wherever you want them. So in this particular example, the QR code took me to a video on their website. And so if I watched the video, I got to see the goats out on pasture, which I thought was really cool. But it could take you to any place else. It could just take you to a different part of your website. It could take you to social media. So it's a really efficient way to share a lot of information with just a small image on the label. Social media is, again, that's also an incredibly popular way to connect with consumers. And so letting your consumers know that you have a presence on social media is valuable. How much it impacts their decision to purchase, I don't know, but just like with the QR code, it allows them perhaps an opportunity to visit your social media sites and see what kind of information you're sharing, and perhaps that information is valuable to them. So social media allows you to connect and engage with those consumers. Again, sharing that same type of content that you might share via QR codes or have on your website and other places. Just make sure that you use the proper icons from the different social media platforms on your label. They do change that from time to time, so you want to make sure you're using the proper icon. And here's some examples. One creamery takes you to their Instagram, or they have an Instagram presence, which I was able to find. Also able to find their website presence, and kind of the newer social media platform that folks are moving to, particularly for the younger generation, is TikTok. And so I know this one creamery, they recently started a TikTok account, and so you can find lots of their posts there as well, which is pretty cool. And the final tool that I want to talk about is redundant labeling. And so, and this is explicit labeling of an attribute that's covered by a more comprehensive label. And so I was able to find an example of this in my local store. And, cursor is freezing on me, but we've got the USDA organic label here, as well as the non-GMO verified certification here on the bottom. And the non-GMO aspect is addressed in organic certification. So by having that non-GMO certification also on the label, that's a redundant labeling of that non-GMO attribute. And so, however, recent research has shown that consumers are more willing to pay for, in this instance, fluid milk with a redundant labeling claim than just one single claim. So there could be an advantage if you do the financial analysis and can afford it to have those multiple certifications, because different consumer groups are looking for specific things when they look at their products. So to wrap up, I think it's really important just to maximize your efforts when it comes to labeling. So look at your labels for underutilized or non-utilized space and think about what you could do with that. Is there additional information that may be appealing to your target market, to your consumers, that fits into those areas that I outlined at the beginning? So for containers, such as the fluid milk, consider using a whole container label or a wrap, as opposed to maybe just a label is on one side, because that gives you some more space. Cheese, how many sides can you put a label on? And what are your opportunity there? Yogurt, a lot of yogurt manufacturers have started putting things on the bottom of the lid, right? Because you pull that lid up and hey, that's the opportune time to share a message with the consumer. So that obviously, the more labels you put on, the more printing you do, there's going to be a cost associated with that. So you do need to do an analysis there. But if you can generate, if you have the opportunity to price higher because of your label, or to generate more sales because of your label, you may be able to recoup that cost. Yes, so look for that under a non-utilized space. Think about using the QR codes or having social media or web presence and sharing that with your consumers. That's really easy to put, very small to put those icons on the label. But again, I can't reiterate this enough. It's really important to know and understand your target market and those market drivers, which is, what are those reasons that consumers, why are they purchasing the products that they do? And if you know that, then you know what information to share on your label that will help market your product to your desired consumers. So with that, I really, I've got this disclaimer really quick. I showed a lot of pictures that had, brands and products in them where you can see the name. There's no discrimination or endorsement by Penn State is implied through the use of those or showing of those images. So that, I thank you. So happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And I can maybe stop sharing my screen so we can see each other more. Figure out how to do that.
Thanks, Sarah. That was a really awesome presentation. So one question that I had, you've traveled around a lot and seen a lot of different dairy products on the shelves and worked with a lot of different dairy producers. What do you think is kind of the biggest missed opportunity that new value-added dairy producers kind of miss when they first get into the market?
I assume we're talking specifically about labels.
Yeah, right.
So I would say, I think it's really easy to want to control costs and therefore go for an extremely simple, plain, boring product label. So I'm thinking like something that you can, I don't know if they're printed out, at home or versus, working with a specific label company, but I'm thinking, that white with the simple black type on it that, it doesn't draw the eye. And if it does, at least to me, it screams commodity, right? So it's just, and if you have a specialty product, I think you need to convey that with, a nicer label, something that conveys that specialty appearance. And certainly there's a cost there, but, I think if you do the math, take the time, do the math and see if it works out. Again, like I said, if you can sell more or price higher because of your nicer label, then it can, be a benefit in the end.
Excellent, thanks. Anybody else have any questions? I guess I have one more. We just have a few more minutes here. So are there any trends that you've noticed that are sort of specific to Pennsylvania that you sort of wonder why they haven't made it to other parts of the country that you've traveled to, as far as labels go?
I can't say I've seen any, trends in labeling specific to geography. Pennsylvania, we have a large Amish population, so there's, certainly they take advantage of that on their labeling to convey the fact that they're Amish, or it's handmade, or some combination, maybe through imagery or words. But I wouldn't. That's not necessarily geographic, because I know there's those populations in other states. So I think it's really thinking about what sets you apart, what makes you unique, and playing on that. And sometimes it may be geographically oriented. If you're located near, an important landmark, for instance, you may be able to take advantage of that. Certainly, I just use the example of the Amish, certain cultural perceptions that, non-Amish consumers may have of products as a result.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. All right, any questions? Going once, going twice, 3 times? All right, well, we're 3 minutes. Oh, okay. We're 3 minutes from 1 o'clock, so we'll end it there. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was amazing.
Thank you to everyone.
Yeah, have a great day. Bye.
Bye.